Welcome back to the Aussie Shed, ladies and gentlemen, for another episode of Project Fairlady. So, today, we're going to get a bit of a look inside this fella right here. And we'll finally get to see whether or not this engine is all it was cracked up to be. So, I think the first thing we need to do, get one of the valve covers off and see what we can see. So, let's move in a bit closer. I'll get a valve cover off. We'll take a look at the cams. Well, I must say, folks, that is nice and clean, which is a good sign. And this camshaft does appear to have quite a lot of lift. So, I think what we're going to have to do here, folks, is measure the lobes on this cam, or measure a lobe, and see how much lift it has, which will tell us what cam it is. There's not a huge selection of cams available for these engines. I was told by the previous owner that this had JWTR4 cams in it, but I was told by the previous owner, who had a lot of the work done, that it has R5 cams in it. So I'll quickly measure them up and we'll be able to work that out pretty quickly. And of course, there's always the chance that these are standard cams, which at a glance I don't think they are. So the first thing we've got to do, folks, is measure the base circle. So we'll measure just across the camshaft before it starts ramping up onto the lobe. That'll give us the base circle. Once we have the base circle, then we'll measure the cam lobe from top to bottom, so from the pointiest part to the back side. Then we will subtract the base circle from the second measurement, and that'll give us the lobe lift. Now, the lobe lift should be a very good identifier as to what cam this is. So we'll get the base circle worked out first. And this is just a bit of a roughie, folks, so I'm just going to use the verniers instead of a micrometer. So that looks like about 29.96. I'll just write that down. Alrighty. There's a lobe. And that's about 39.7576 maybe. Alright, I'll go and write that down. Alright, folks, so what we have here is our overall, including the lobe, which I've written down 39.75. Our base circle, 29.96. The difference is 9.79 millimeters, so that is our lift. Now, the JWT R5 cam is listed as 9.78 mil of lift. So from those measurements, these pretty much have to be JWT R5 cams, which I sort of figured they would be, considering how lumpy the idle was. So that's pretty good. They look like they're in pretty good nick. None of the lobes seem to have any real significant wear on them, on this one cam anyway in particular. So that's certainly a good sign. Now, if I look down into here, oh yeah, the battery, I can see that this has an ARP head stud kit in it. So, you know, we've got obvious ARP head studs and nuts and washers down in here. So, things are starting to look good, folks. Things are starting to look good. So we've got that nice clutch that we saw in the last video, that nice twin plate clutch, JWT R5 cams, ARP head studs. Now, another thing that I noticed, and just give me a second here, folks. Now, I'll just take the camera off. probably can't even really see. A lot of porting here, folks. A lot of port work. Looks like it's been done by hand because it is a little bit irregular, but there is a lot of porting being done to these exhaust ports. Quite a bit of carbon in there here and there though too, which is making it really hard to distinguish exactly what's what. But I can see that there's definitely been a lot of porting done to these heads. So that's a good thing, unless they've done a shit job, which at this stage it's pretty hard to tell. Also a little bit hard to tell without having a look at one of the standard heads for sort of comparison. But things like the radiuses and stuff like that, it's not going to be that hard to tell whether it's been done decent or also whether there's any improvements that can be done. I am actually quite experienced with porting heads, so once I get the heads off and get them stripped down and cleaned up, I'll have a bit of a look at them and see if I need to touch it up a bit or whether they're good to go. I guess I'll see. Alright, so what are we going to do next? I think we might pop the sump off and get a bit of a look at the bottom end, eh? I don't really like leaving engines hanging upside down like this, folks, with the head still on. Yeah, just not something I'm a big fan of. Puts a lot of stress on these lower mounts. So we'll get this sump cracked off and we'll have a bit of a look at it and get it back up. Okie doke, so we've definitely got an ARP stud kit, and we have ARP 2000 rod bolts. They look like eagle rods, maybe eagle rods. Yep, I think they're eagle rods. Can't identify the brand of the pistons at this point, but it all looks very new and very clean, folks. Very, very nice. Alright, so that's pretty positive, folks. That's pretty positive. I was starting to worry that I'd done my day there for a while with this thing, but that all looks really, really nice. I can see markings on all the pistons with all the weights that someone's hand drawn on there from when the assembly was balanced. Mate, it's all looking really, really nice, this bottom end, folks. Really, really nice. Well, that's good. So we've definitely got a really nicely built bottom end, and the whole motor seems to be very, very good indeed. So hopefully, folks, we're certainly going to be able to make some power with this sucker. But I will pull things down a little bit further. I don't know whether I'm going to tear this whole bottom end apart because it does look really good, but I'll certainly see more when I get the heads off. So I'll pop this sump back on, folks, and we'll flick it back up and we'll chat a little bit more about it. So all in all, folks, that's a pretty positive outcome. I am definitely going to be taking the heads off and stripping them down just to check out the valves, make sure everything's good with the heads. There's a lot to the heads, and there's a lot of stuff that I want to check, make sure there's no valve bind anywhere, see how everything's been going since it was built. You know, that all the valves are sealing up and all that sort of stuff. I assume it's all going to be pretty good, but I still want to get it all apart and check it myself. I want to have a look at the valves. It's meant to have 1mm oversized valves in it as well, so I'll be interested to see what they're like. Have a look at the porting if there's any on the intake side, which I'll be fairly confident that there is, and start you know, getting a bit more stuff off it, and just really assess the quality of the sort of port job that's been done on it. I'm also doing a bit of work on the turbos. I'll just go over to the bench and I'll give you a heads up on what's going on with the turbos. So I've pulled the turbos apart, folks. Quite a bit of work involved in doing that. I had to put a ton of heat into these rear housings to get these bolts undone here. They were very, very tight, you know, very, very tight. There's no way I could have got these out without the Aussie, and you know, that was even quite hard. And even once I had all the bolts out, one of the centers wouldn't move at all. Like, it took so much beating to get it loose. But it's all good now, folks. They're all cleaned up. I've got all the carbon off everything. Everything's sort of looking pretty good. There's quite a lot of schmutz in the water side of these things, as you would have seen from all the cooling system stuff that I showed you that was really corroded. I don't know what to go with this is though, folks, because you can see the motor's obviously built and it's pretty fresh. Why there's so much crud in the cooling system, whether the block wasn't flushed properly or whether the thing sat for a really long time, which is probably the most likely scenario, that it sat for a long time without coolant, mixing it with straight water or not a high enough concentration of coolant. But that's something that I'll deal with as I go. Once I get the heads off, I'll get more of an idea how bad that is, whether it's just sort of superficial or whether, you know, I'm going to have to actually tear everything apart and get it all properly flushed out, or possibly I might be able to do a bit of it myself here. But the turbos are in reasonable condition, bearing wise and everything, they're perfect. One of them was a tiny bit oily on the back side compared to the other, but so what I've decided to do, folks, is while I've got them apart, I'm going to replace all the seals in them. Fortunately nowadays with ball bearing turbos, you can buy seal kits for them quite easily. They're available from a lot of places, and all the seal kits seem to be of a really good quality, especially genuine ones if you can get them. And while I've got it apart, I've decided, and this is something I was really tossing up for a long time, folks, whether or not to replace the turbos with something a little bit more modern, because back in the day these were really gun turbos. So these are Garrett GT 2860 RS, commonly known as the Disco Potato. These were, you know, quite a popular turbo, but this is 2 generations old now. This was superseded by the GDX Gen 1 and then the GDX Gen 2. Now my personal preference, if I had money to burn with this thing, would be to put 2 Gen 2 GDX 2867s on there, but unfortunately this build is eating up so much of my cash because absolutely everything on the car is needed replacing, and I've got 2 perfectly good turbos here. I figure I may as well just keep them. If I do decide later on to step up to a GDX 2867, they use the same rear housing, so I'll be able to just buy a super core with a compressor cover for them, and I should be good to go, because I am going to be getting these exhaust housings ceramic coated, so I don't want to be wasting money on them if I'm going to be replacing them. So I figure while I'm doing a seal kit on these things, I might do a small upgrade on them. And so what I've done, folks, is I've bought some billet compressor wheels. So this is a modern 7+7 design billet compressor wheel to replace the 6+6 cast wheel on the original setup there. Now these are a lot lighter. I'll know exactly how much when I get them out, but the biggest benefit of this is the smaller area where this sort of bolts through, and the sort of the shaft thickness on the center of the turbo. It gives you more blade area, and like I say, they're lighter and they're a little bit more of a modern design. So we're going to be going to billet compressor wheels, which will be just, you know, it's not going to be a huge improvement, folks. I'm not expecting it to be, you know, earth-shatteringly better. But what I am hoping for is a little bit faster spool, and because of the lesser restriction, a little bit more top end. And as you can see from the engine, it's sort of built for top end power. Having those R5 cams kind of makes that sort of pretty obvious. So I could have gone for an 11 blade design, which is fairly similar to the Gen 1 GDX style wheel, but with the Gen 2 GDX they went back to an 8 blade billet compressor wheel. So once this is done, I feel this turbo will be equivalent to a Gen 2 GDX 2860, okay, which is rated for a bit more power than this turbo. So what I've discovered from all my research is all of the wheel sizes and everything are will be almost exactly the same as this setup. They will be pretty much exactly the same. I did look at putting a GDX 2867 compressor wheel on there, but it would have meant that I had to change compressor housings or machine this compressor housing out. If I had a bigger lathe, I probably would have machined this compressor housing out, or even gone to a GD 2871 style compressor. But like I say, at this stage, just going to a billet compressor wheel, in all honesty, it may even meet my power goals that I'm after. I'm only looking at about 600, 650s where I want to be with the thing, and I think that's achievable on these turbos, particularly running the 85. I have these exhaust housings are 0.86 AR, so once again they're more for top end, you know, so that it all sort of works together, and that's what you've got to do, folks. You've got to kind of set yourself a particular goal in mind and then work towards it, just so you try and match your components as best as you can. Obviously once this is done, once I get these turbos apart, replace the seals and the seal plates and put the billet compressor wheels on them, they then have to be sent away to be rebalanced, because it would be literally crazy to fit a new compressor wheel and then not get the whole assembly rebalanced again. So all up, doing this myself, what it's costing me for the seal kit, the billet compressor wheel, and getting them rebalanced is about $350 to $400 per turbo, and that's pretty cheap, I feel, for what I'm going to get out of it. I'll know, at least I'll know when they go in, that the turbos are basically new, the bearings seem to be in perfect condition, there's no shaft play in them, you know, and upgraded to a slightly newer design. Anyway, folks, when it comes time to tear these down, I might make a bit of a video on upgrading the GD 2860 to GDX 2860 specs using this wheel. So if you're interested in some very basic turbo mods and how to strip one of these GD series ball bearing turbos down, that'll be coming up in an upcoming video. So let's take a look at some other stuff now. Obviously there's a lot of stuff that's been stripped off the car to get it to this point. The whole front cross member and suspension's gone, and you know, basically everything in there is now off the car. Everything that came off the car was filthy dirty, everything's flogged out, so basically what I've been doing is cleaning everything. So all this is clean. That's our front cross member, you know, gearbox sort of cover plate, steering rack, lower control arms, etc. Steering rack's going to be rebuilt. Lower control arms have to get all the bushes and ball joints and everything pressed out of them, and then they'll be added to the pile of stuff that's going to the powder coaters, which is quite a lot of stuff. Over here, it's a bit of a wiring loom, but it's mainly our front hubs and our front uprights. These have actually been pressure cleaned, even though they look filthy dirty. They're actually way cleaner than they were. I have just about everything on hand to rebuild these, you know, new wheel bearings, studs, new kingpin assemblies, you know, all new bushes and all that sort of stuff. These have to be stripped down and sent off to the powder coaters once they're down to sort of bare components, you know. And of course our engine bay, folks, as you can see, it's in a huge mess. It needs to be completely stripped out. The wiring looms, AC piping, brake booster, clutch master cylinder, you know, all the stuff everywhere. There's so much stuff that's got to come out of here, and then all the bodywork's got to sort of begin to get this engine bay all painted and all that sort of stuff. So there's a lot of work ahead of me, folks, a lot of work ahead of me. And being that I'm just a mere man, folks, just one mere mortal man, it's going to take me quite a while to do it all. So for the time being, the engine, now that it's had its exploratory done on it and we know exactly where we are with it, I've already started ordering components for it. I already have a bit of stuff here. I have some BDE adjustable exhaust pulleys for it. I've got to get the intake pulleys. I've got, you know, new fuel rails and everything like that to get for it. So I want to get all the components here for the engine before I go tearing it down, because I don't have a lot of space here in the Aussie shed, and I've really got to be careful that I don't end up in a position where I have shit everywhere and I can't work. So I really need to approach this carefully, folks. So what I'm going to do, small components like the turbos and stuff, I can rebuild those, wrap them up, put them up on the shelf so they're ready to go. All the front end stuff and everything, that can all be sort of torn down, and once I've got a pile ready to go to the powder coaters, that can all be sort of sent off, and then I'm going to start working on the car up here on the engine bay, just tearing stuff out of there, because there's a lot of work just in stripping out the rest of the engine bay, let alone prepping it and painting it. So for the time being, the engine's just going to get a sheet of plastic put over it and taped up and put to one side. And the next few videos that you'll be seeing, I'll just be probably working on components while I get everything together to have this ready to go before I strip it down. Because ideally what I want to do, folks, is I want to have the engine bay and the front end back together on the car, or able to be assembled on the car, so that once the engine is rebuilt, it'll be going straight back in the car. I don't want to rebuild the engine now and then have it be sitting in the corner of the shed ready to go, and it just sit and sit and sit for ages while I finish everything else. I want it to be really fresh when I put it in the car, just to minimize the chance of, you know, anything happening to it and, you know, it ingesting any crap or just anything like that. So as I say, folks, as exciting as it'll be to sort of get the heads off the engine and start rebuilding those and getting a good look at it all, at least we know where we are with it. It's a good motor, it's had a lot of money spent on it, and I'm really happy with that. And we'll just have to see where the rest of this journey takes us, folks. But I guarantee it's going to be exciting when this thing's done. It's going to make good power, it's going to be a beautiful car, and I'm sure all you guys are going to love it. So just a quick video today, folks. I hope you enjoyed it. Not a whole heap of information there, but at least you get to see where I'm heading with this and what you can expect coming up in future episodes. So as always, folks, if you like the episode, give it a thumbs up. Remember to subscribe to the channel if you want more updates on Project Fairlady, or you're just interested in any of my other videos. I've got quite a lot of videos on the channel now. As always, folks, I'll bloody well see you on the next one. Cheers.